Hello and welcome to Creative Walks episode 31. My name is Pedro Bonatto. If you heard the last episode, I did a little reading of a poem by Charles Bukowski. And I think it's a very important poem for artists, this idea that you need the perfect situation to create. And the reason why you are not creating is because you don't have those conditions. So you daydream of that time in a vague future where you're going to find yourself with the perfect tools and the perfect environment and the perfect mindset to do your creations. I think that's a very common problem for artists. And one of the things that I noticed in my own journey is that this problem is not just for beginning artists. The idea of the blocked writer or the artist that is in a crisis is kind of like a meme, or even there is even this archetype of the suicidal artist or someone that will only have recognition later in life. And there is this notion from people that don't live from art but would like to at least have it more involved, have more creation involved in their life, that if they commit to a life of art creation, especially if it's with monetary interest, they will have to give up a lot of their life. And I think that's a very erroneous idea. I remember thinking in those modes of thinking for a long time. And I thought that whoever made it, it's because they had a different mindset than I had. And lo and behold, when I was studying David Allen and the Getting Things Done methodology that I mentioned in the previous episode, he mentioned a book that I decided to go look just because of the title. And it actually changed my life, and I would like to recommend it for you. So from time to time, I will actually do a mini review of a book, and I will recommend readings for you in areas that maybe you haven't ventured into yet. So the book that I would like to recommend is called The War of Art. Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles, by author Stephen Pressfield. And the cool thing about this book is that Pressfield is a writer, but he's sort of like a late bloomer in terms of getting successful with his art and his craft. I think he was around 40, he mentions in his book, when he was able to sell his first actual movie script, and it was a disaster, and then he kept going. So it's a fantastic read. It's a very short book. It is available also on an audio version, which is read by the author, and it's quite amazing. I cannot recommend this book enough if you are an artist or if you have any kind of artistic tendencies, or I think this applies, and he mentions this in the book, to any kind of transformational endeavors. If you are trying to lose weight, all the way to create a company or start a new relationship or break off of another relationship. And the main concept that he talks about in this book is what he calls resistance. Resistance with capital R, that manifests in many different ways in an artist's life. And the idea is how whenever you are put in contact with that thing that you love the most, or that thing that you really would like to try, that's the thing that you will avoid like the plague. So the idea is that the closest thing you have to your heart is the thing that you're going to resist. And that applies to artists whenever you're trying to create a new project or start a new venture. Those things will happen to you. And the crazy thing is that they happen even to the people that are super successful. The difference is that they go through the motions in the process anyway. So he talks about relating this idea of resistance to self-sabotage, to procrastination, whenever you're looking for trouble or when you're addicted to a certain level of stress. And he also talks a little bit about this idea that whenever you're put in contact with this concept of resistance, you can even think of it metaphorically as this dragon that you have to fight again and again and again. It's not like you win and then suddenly you're an artist that is always super prolific. It's something that will always come back. It's this mythological idea of the dragon, something that gets you and is scary, and it's between you and your goal. That's not by chance. And I think that's something that Jordan Peterson mentioned, was that dragons, they are these creatures, the amalgam of fears that represent the unknown. But we know that when we venture into the unknown hoards the gold, has something that is useful for us. But to come back to the idea of the book, on the book, Stephen Pressfield, he first talks a little bit about the concept of resistance, and he gives many, many examples of how that applies. And you will find that in your life in many, many ways. From people that decide to have like love affairs to sabotage whatever they're working, all the way to having problems with addiction or booze. And one thing that it's sort of like, that's my 2 cents on that notion of the ways that people procrastinate. I noticed this in a couple of friends when they use noble and good reasons not to do certain projects. And in my view, those are procrastination and resistance field things as well. For example, I remember some friends saying, oh, but I have my kids, or I have this career, there are so many people that depend on me, I cannot afford to go into this venture and become a painter and, I don't know, sell jewelry by the beach. The problem with that idea is that there are thousands of examples of people that did just that. And it will be something that you can do part-time, or you can do, say, whatever hour or 2 hours that you have at night or early in the morning to dedicate to your craft, and how that will actually help, just like doing exercise help your life, doing a creative endeavor actually helps lift your spirit and make you a better all-around person, less bitter. So even this idea of I'm not doing this because I have all this burden is in itself a form of resistance. So I'd like to, he doesn't talk that much about that in the book, but it's something that I'd like to point out to you. The second part, he tries to talk about where inspiration comes from, and the idea that the key is to have discipline, meaning you work no matter if you have inspiration or not. And the third part of the book, he sort of talks a little bit more of this in the abstract, and he goes a little bit metaphysical and a little bit more esoterical for my taste, but he even in the book acknowledges like you can think of those things in the abstract, because he talks about muses and fairies and creativity being the life force of the universe and all that. So it's kind of an interesting thing in my point of view if you consider it metaphorically, but some people like to consider it, and I think he does it, in a literal sense. Another thing that he mentions that I had this experience a couple of times in my life is that whenever you are working on this project and you are really fighting resistance and you're really on the flow and you're really working, how it looks like you're taking dictation. It looks like a muse is literally whispering in your ear what you should write or you should sing or play or dance, or all the artworks that you could create. And it seems like you're seeing it and copying it down. At least I had this experience many times. We don't know where ideas come from, and I think it's some sort of investigation that I will talk more about in the future, and let me know if you're interested in that subject. So just to make it a little bit short episode again, the book is called The War of Art, Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles by Stephen Pressfield. It's the real deal. He has a whole series of books about creativity after this one. I highly recommend you start with this book. It will change your life, and let me know what you think. With that, again, my name is Pedro Bonatto. You can find me on all social media at Pedro Bonatto with 2 T's. If you have a moment and you're listening to this podcast on iTunes, or if you're listening on YouTube, I'm putting all the episodes there in case you just want to leave it on the background, the audio playing. If you can recommend to your friends or leave a review on your favorite player, that will help spread the word. And this is not a for-profit podcast. I'm trying to share my thoughts and my process with whoever is interested. I do not intend to grow this to 1 million people. My point is to help people that are in the same boat as I am, even if sometimes they have bigger boats and more advanced boats, or maybe they just have a little raft and they want some ideas of how to get out of a crazy island. That's my intent with this podcast. So I thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.